Okay, so thank you guys for joining us. Before we start, I want to let you all know that this will be our last Zoom only lecture. Next month, we're going to start doing in-person lectures again. We will also be live streaming them. So it'll be kind of a hybrid lecture. So if you're still not comfortable being out, at public events, you can still watch it online. Otherwise, you can come to the community center where we normally have them, and we're going to start doing that again next month now that things are kind of getting back to normal. So with that, today we have Lou Dodson lecturing for us, the Citizen Science Project. Lou Dodson was formerly the assistant manager at Bill Baggs State Park, and now she is the park manager for the Islamorada area state parks, which includes 5 different state parks. Is that right? So big job, lots of parks that she manages. So she's gonna talk to us about that today and show us a video, and then also talk about Key Biscayne connections. So Lou, with that, I will hand it off to you and mute myself.
Okay. Well, before we get the video started, can everybody hear me okay? Remy, I'm talking loud enough? Good?
Yeah,
okay.
I can hear you.
All right. Well, thank everyone out there for attending. I appreciate it. I'm very excited. You guys are getting to see the exclusive first view of a set of videos that we had produced to inform the public about the Islamorada area state parks. There are 4 of our parks featured in this video. I wrote the script, so hope everybody enjoys that. And there are some local Key Biscayners who star in some of the footage. And I believe one of them is actually watching tonight, so I'm excited. Too bad you can't ask for autographs over the Zoom meetings, but if you see them around town, I'm sure you'll recognize them. So with that being said, welcome to our meeting, and hope you'll enjoy the videos. And then we'll, after the videos conclude, we'll talk about some of the Key Biscayne connections with Islamorada and my parks, besides just me. And then I'll answer any questions that you have. And I don't know how usually Romeo handles questions, but I will be happy to try to answer anything that you ask. And without further ado, Romeo, will you start the video, please?
Yes. Just one quick thing. I'm not sure if my slide said it or not. I don't know if I updated it, but you can email questions or tweet them. We will also keep the chat open so you can ask questions that way. Peter and I will read off the questions that we get in those various routes. Just to avoid people talking over each other, it's just easier to keep them in writing. Let me get the video going.
In 1733, the 287-ton Dutch-built ship, San Pedro, was loaded with New World goods, including silver. It was on its way to Europe when a hurricane struck. The San Pedro passed over the reef before sinking in Hawk Channel, off Lower Matacumbe Key. Despite the wreck, nearly all the cargo was salvaged and taken to a nearby salvage camp on Indian Key. The sparse underwater remains lie south of Indian Key, in 18 feet of water. This easy access allows exploration of this archaeological site and provides a visual treasure trove of nautical history and marine life. remains of San Pedro consist of the ship's ballast stones, an anchor, and replica 1733 style cannons. Protected by its designation as an underwater archaeological preserve. The treasure of San Pedro has now become the jewel-like reef fish that swims silently around the remains of the past, enticing visitors to dream of former glories while witnessing its return to nature.
Nearby Indian Key not only provided a base for the San Pedro crew, its use by humans spans thousands of years before the arrival of the Spanish in Florida, from when the Key was home to prehistoric Indians to the 1830s when Indian Key was the seat of Dade County. Under the direction of Jacob Hausman, who bought the island in 1831, Indian Key challenged Key West as a lucrative wrecking center. Hausman built a store, hotel, residences, warehouses, and wharves as he turned Indian Key into a busy seaport. This prosperous community came to a violent end on August 7, 1840, when the town was attacked and burned by Seminole Indians during the Second Seminole War. Today, exploring the ghostly ruins of this once thriving community is an immersion into one era of Key's history. Placards along the trails tell the history of the town and some notable events that took place on the island. Indian Key's ghosts of the past give way to the enjoyment of present day.
past inhabitants of Indian Key sought riches beneath the waters off its shore. Deep water channels in this area wind through shallow, emerald-hued seagrass beds around mangrove islands, leading to the living heart of the 10,000 acres surrounding Lignumvitae Key Botanical State Park. Many people fantasize about living on an island, picturing a tropical idyll away from the cares of the world. The Matheson caretaker's house tells another story of island living. It is one of hard work and surviving the elements, modifying the land to suit various visions of owners. It is, finally, the story of a dream to protect and preserve a living example of precious natural resources that make the Florida Keys such a special place. Lignumvitae Key has provided a base for human inhabitants over time to enjoy its bounty. Abundant fish and shellfish from the surrounding seagrass flats, and Lignumvitae trees from what is now one of the last remaining old-growth hardwood hammocks. Stepping into this forest is literally stepping back in time. It is a treasure trove of plant, bird, and butterfly species that are rapidly disappearing from modern Keys environments. As biologist E.O. Wilson remarked upon visiting, to enter the forest on Lignumvitae Key is to step far into the past and to come as close as we ever will to witnessing the Keys as they were before the coming of man.
Just as Lignumvitae Key allows a glimpse of the Keys as they were before the coming of man, visiting Windley Key Fossil Reef gives a vision of the coral that helped to form the Keys from underwater life that existed in an ancient sea. Human activity in this area uncovered this geological prize while quarrying for material to construct Henry Flagler's overseas railroad in the 1900s. The story of the building of the railway and the use of keystone as an iconic building material is illustrated by the equipment left behind in the old quarry pits and the exhibits in the visitor center. More ancient treasures surround the quarries. Lush hardwood hammock slopes into mangrove forest, sheltering a variety of butterflies like malachites, swallowtails, and fritillaries, as well as birds, including the threatened white-crowned pigeon, mangrove cuckoo, and black-whiskered vireo. The quarry walls invite visitors to dive deeper into the ancient story of corals and share the discoveries of scientists on formation of the Florida Keys. The dramatic play of light and shadow as the day progresses gives a contemplative view of the passage of time and the gifts of nature displayed for all to enjoy.
Okay.
Well, I hope everybody enjoyed a view of 4 of our beautiful Islamorada area state parks, and that you recognized at least one of your Key Biscayne families in the Windley video, along with Dagu the super dog. And you can see all those guys, especially Ranger Pearl on the Cape Florida Facebook page, as she tells you about public service announcements. We're very grateful to have had them participate in our video. So I think there was somebody still waiting to come in the room.
They're in now.
Okay, perfect. So there are some very interesting connections between Key Biscayne and Islamorada area state parks. And I was glad to find those things. Hi, Ranger Pearl, by the way, I see she's watching. the two people that I was most interested in, number one was Henry Perrine, Dr. Henry Perrine, who was first off a consul in Mexico, and he was charged by President John Quincy Adams with finding out any plants that might have medicinal properties or healthy properties that could be imported and grown in the United States. Dr. Perrine's a very interesting figure. You may have even heard of Perrine, Florida, which was a land grant that he obtained to grow his tropical plants eventually. But first, when he first started collecting seeds and plants, he decided that Key Biscayne, and especially Cape Florida on Key Biscayne, would be a great place to start his tropical plant nursery. And he sent over, he was one of 100 different consuls who sent and collected plants. And he made a friendship with Charles Howe and John DuBose. John DuBose was the lighthouse keeper at Cape Florida. And in 1833, Perrine sent him all of these plant samples and seeds. And he wrote, and I'm going to read it because I didn't memorize it, said, "We have testimony of the healthiness of Cape Florida in its most unequivocal form. The family of J. DuBose, consisting of 11 whites and several Negroes, he's not had a case of sickness during the last 7 years. The tenderest and most productive vegetables of the tropics are flourishing under his care. The harbor at the Cape is easily accessible, and a voyage to and from the northern states can be made easily. Humanity requires that Key Biscayne should be made an available resort as soon as possible. At Cape Florida, an association might be readily formed with a capital of $100,000, which would furnish the buildings, gardens, and other conveniences requisite for the most squeamish visitor, and keep a packet running every month with passengers and effects from up north. The most luxurious accommodations could be profitably afforded at half the price of Havana." So he sent these crates there to Cape Florida, and they were flourishing until they were destroyed by a hurricane in 1835. So I bet we all wish that we could still establish that healthy resort for $100,000. That would be something wonderful. But Dr. Perrine definitely enjoyed the tropics. And one of the things where he finally ended up moving was to Indian Key, where he also sent crates of botanical samples and eventually moved his family there from New York on Christmas Eve in 1840, I believe. Don't quote me on that one. But unfortunately, he moved there just in time to be part of the Indian attack that occurred on Indian Key. And he was, even though his family escaped by crawling underneath the floor of the house where they were staying and hiding out in what's called the turtle crawls, where they kept sea turtles to use for meals. And his family hid underneath, but he thought that he could speak reasonably to the attackers, and he attempted to do so, but he was murdered in the house. So he lost his life there, but his plants and his dedication to medicinal plants in Florida still carried on without him, and his son eventually ended up writing his memoirs about Indian Key and about Perrine, Florida. So a little connection there that he ended up on Indian Key, but he certainly saw Cape Florida and Key Biscayne as a beautiful, healthy spot where people could definitely come to recuperate from those cold winters up north. An interesting story about Dr. Perrine is that he studied quinine, and he dosed himself with quinine before he went out on medical calls. But he was also studying arsenic, and unfortunately at one call, and when he was in a hurry, he poured his quinine into a container that had arsenic in it, and he poisoned himself. So he recovered from that poisoning, but ever after that, he became incredibly sensitive to cold temperatures, and that is what inspired his traveling to the tropics and trying to find a more copacetic environment. So that is one Key Biscayne connection. And as you saw the models there for Indian Key, he lived in one of the houses that had the wharf out into the water, and his family was able to save themselves by hiding there. Now, the other connection with Key Biscayne is Mr. William John Matheson. And I'm sure probably everybody who's listening is aware that Mr. Matheson owned large portions of the island of Key Biscayne. And he also is associated with Lignumvitae Key, in that he acquired Lignumvitae Key and built that house that you saw there in the film. That house was never meant for his habitation because there are way too many bugs on the island, as visitors can attest to now. If they come during the summer, there's a large, healthy, salt-breeding marsh mosquito population. But Mr. Matheson, who was part of the Key Biscayne Yacht Club, lived aboard his yacht, and he would sail down and anchor offshore of Lignumvitae Key, and then the house that he built was for his caretakers, and so that he would, yes, Matheson Hammock was one of that. But so Matheson owned quite a bit of property all around, and many things are named after him, but we now call it the Matheson House there on Lignumvitae. And it is open to the public as a visitor center, and as an example of the type of living that was done by the caretakers there in the 1930s. The island itself was not overdeveloped, just the 5 acres that seemed like kind of the lawn around the house that you saw in the film. And they did grow some pineapples and coconuts and things like that. They even had a landing strip in one part of the island, but mainly it was an undisturbed hardwood hammock and known for its Lignumvitae trees. Now, if you're at all familiar with Lignumvitae, it is one of the hardest and densest woods in the world, and is even not now so much, but is still employed to build various parts of ships, ships rigging. It has a natural oil to it, so it was used to carve the different pulleys and things that the ship's ropes would go through, because its natural oils would keep the ropes lubricated. It also was able to be carved into the prop bearings, so then for submarines, and you will still find some submarines with Lignumvitae wood as bearings. So very interesting and unique piece of wood that is native to the Caribbean and to the shores of South America, and it means tree of life, Lignumvitae. So we have one of the largest remaining virgin hardwood hammocks in the Florida Keys, and we have many endangered species there, and would love to have folks come out and visit us so that you can see. For instance, we are just now reintroducing the Schaus swallowtail butterfly to our island, where I think we got down to 4 in all of South Florida. And we've been very pleased with releasing pupa and caterpillars and adult butterflies on Lignumvitae, because we have such a great supply of food for them and nesting habitat. And we're hoping that we'll start to see more and more of them as they begin to hatch out over the next 2 years. So Master Point there in Key Biscayne was owned by Mr. Matheson. So you have a connection that he liked to live part-time as a rich chemical engineer. He developed aniline dyes. He worked in New York, but he did travel to Key Biscayne and also further down to Lignumvitae Key. I'd love to answer any questions that you have about the parks and encourage you to come and visit. We'd love to see you. Right now, the main way to access the offshore parks are by kayak or paddleboard, but we will be having a new concession taking trips out to our brand new dock that's now being restored from Hurricane Irma damage.
All right, thank you so much, Lou. So we'll go to questions. If you guys could just type your questions into the chat so that we don't accidentally have people talking at the same time, that would be great. If you don't mind, actually, and I'll read the questions out loud as they come in. And if you don't mind, Lou, I have a couple questions.
Okay, sure.
Is Islamorada too far north for where the key deer are?
It is north of where key deer are located.
Okay.
The Key Deer Wildlife Refuge is in Big Pine Key, and so it's a little further south from here. There are not key deer located on any of the parks in our area, although there's never been evidence that they existed this far north. They are a subspecies of the white-tailed deer that have, shrunk in size based on their island dwelling.
The other question I had was in that video, the second park, I don't remember which one that was, but the second park that they talked about. Yeah, so yeah. They mentioned that, there was that town that was there that was thriving until it got attacked by the Seminole Indians. Did that used to, were they attacked because they had taken Native American land and they were, having the war to get it back, or was there just this ongoing war for, they were just in the area? Or do you know what that, like, why they?
There were several things that were going on at the time. The Seminole Indians were definitely being persecuted by European settlers in terms of land taking. There definitely were Indians and Native American populations on both Lignumvitae and Indian Key, although I don't have a lot of archaeological evidence of habitation on Indian Key. But in the 1800s, when Jacob Houseman left Key West and came to Indian Key, the Native Americans had already established their own salvage businesses. So there is a reef offshore, and ships were reckoned before Jacob Houseman got there. And the Seminoles had perfected going out in canoes and actually, I don't know how much, taking either prisoners or rescuing shipwrecked individuals and also salvaging those ships. So they saw Jacob Houseman as competition and of kind of horning in on their business, if you will. There was also a large move to eradicate Native Americans from South Florida and bounties that were offered. So there definitely was enmity there and a feeling that they were being, they felt they were being attacked and that their lands were being compromised. The original evidence between Indian Key and then Lignumvitae Key is that Lignumvitae was probably used for some type of historical burial ground. There are human remains from the Paleo-Indian age there that we don't display or talk about because it's protected. And it seems that people went to that island to bury their dead, but they didn't live there or have any kind of established settlement there until the Europeans came in and they each owned, like there were a series of owners for that island.
Oh, wow.
So when Jacob Hausman took over Indian Key, he established you saw those were the foundations of the houses. And we like to say it's the only ghost town in the Florida Keys. It was 11 acres and housed over 50 people there, many of whom were his wreckers and the warehouse workers. And it became the county seat of Dade County. So it's hard to imagine that that was one of the largest populations on an 11-acre island, but it was.
Yeah. So there's a question in the chat. What were the trains that they were showing that they were building? What were the trains used for?
Well, the train was Henry Flagler's Keys extension. So as he had this, they call it Flagler's Folly because he had a dream of extending the railroad past the mainland of Florida and have it extend to Key West and then connect Key West to Havana through a series of ferries. And he initially pretty much bankrupted, I won't say bankrupted, but he spent all his money building that railroad. So it was one train that made the trip down from the mainland to Key West. And Windley Fossil Reef Geological State Park was discovered. The fossils or the rocks were discovered because they needed the limestone rubble to fill the archways of the railway bridges. And even today, as you drive down the Keys, you will see the remains and the archways. They make up now the Florida Keys Overseas Heritage Trail, which is another one of the parks that I manage. And that is now a continuous trail that runs 109 miles from Key Largo to Key West, and that you can ride your bike or walk. You can fish on the bridges. Not all of the bridges connect all the way across. Sometimes you have to cut up onto the highway with your bicycle, but it is a way to travel from Key Largo to Key West. And that's what the train is you were seeing, is Flagler's Railroad.
That's cool. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to write them in the chat. If you're not comfortable or you don't know how to use the chat, if you just turn your video on, I'll just call on you and you can ask your question out loud. In the meantime, so you mentioned the dog. I missed the name, but I heard Super Dog.
DAGOO.
So I take it dogs are allowed in the state parks, because for some reason I thought that dogs weren't allowed in state parks.
It depends on the park and on the areas of the park. So Daggoo was starring in the Windley Key Fossil Reef State Park video. We do allow dogs there as long as they are on a leash and under the control of their owners. And Daggoo is a very good, well-behaved dog. We do not allow dogs on Lignumvitae Key because it is the state's first botanical state park, and it is full of sensitive biological areas that we don't want to have disturbed by anything other than managed tours. So for instance, even when you witness the people walking back into the hammock, it is part of the charter when the Nature Conservancy helped the state purchase the land, that people will only walk on the trails when accompanied by a ranger. So it's not like you can come out there and just walk around free for all. You can walk on the 5 developed acres where the house is located, but in terms of going back into the natural hardwood hammocks, you must be accompanied by a ranger.
Wow.
We're hoping to extend our trail tours so that we can make longer trail walks. It's been a little circumscribed since COVID hit us, but now that we are getting back to a normal interpretive season, we hope to extend the walks and make some fairly big loop trails so that people who like to do more than just a mile will be able to walk with the ranger and see more of the island. there's quite a few interesting archaeological features that are visible and we're able to show people.
That's pretty cool. Are there any other questions for Lou? Okay. Oh, is there more info about E.O. Wilson's time in the area?
I believe there is. The quote that I used where he talks about it's the closest you come to stepping back into a time before the man's advent to the Keys comes from a very large dissertation written by Dr. Peter Jutro, Jutro. I am not sure that E.O. Wilson wrote any books or pamphlets about Lignumvitae Key, but I see that that's Mary Rose who asked that. So Mary Rose, I can get back with you on that. I'll check in and see if I can find any other information about his visit there. But Jutro's publication is about really thick, and he wrote about the whole Lignumvitae Key and the biology and ecology there, and that has gone out of print. But I believe he's going to try to republish it. He just spoke from the Keys History and Discovery Center, and he usually does one program a year about his experiences and knowledge of Lignumvitae.
I know he did an unusual and contrived experiment on one of those small islands. Mary Rose again.
That E.O. Wilson did, Mary Rose, or are you talking about Dr. Jutro? Because I'm not familiar with that. I'll have to find out about it.
Yeah, sorry. It's easier to just talk. Yeah, he did one of those very small, and it was in basically killed everything everything on the island to sort of replicate the conditions of like early life and how what are the first animals that would and plants that would reestablish themselves on the it was very strange, and it was something that was in the 1960s that I was thinking like it would be very, very, very difficult to do something like that today. That's why I was wondering if there was like some sort of, I was wondering if he had written anything in any of his novels about Islamorada. That's what the basis of that question was.
That's very interesting. I've not heard that, so I'll have to look into it and get back to you on that one.
Oh, interesting. I'm curious, do you often run into problems with like illegal poaching or anything like that in the parks that you have to deal with?
Knock on wood, I haven't experienced that in my tenure here, but it is always something of concern, especially because we have a number of endangered species that are in our parks, both at Lignumvitae and at Windley. We are home to the Keys tree cactus in Windley and a couple of our other plots, which Fairchild Gardens has partnered with us in rooting and growing from little buttons that come off the cactus to now they're actually, I'd say, anywhere 12 to 30 inches high, and we've replanted at Windley. So yes, we don't want people to poach, and we do watch for that and watch. That's why we're so guarded about locations and things like that. Unfortunately, in terms of cultural history, there has been quite a bit of poaching, if you will, of cultural artifacts, both from Indian and some from Lignumvitae. And that's happened back in the time period before it was a state park. With the flora and fauna, Lignumvitae Key is home to some beautiful ligulous tree snails that are not doing so well on the mainland, but are doing wonderfully on the Key. And again, we try to make sure that people are not walking into their habitat unless they're accompanied by a ranger. The Shao swallowtail butterfly, we have actually caught people up more towards Pennicamp or the Dagny Johnson area, trying to net the butterflies. And they are quite rare. We have not had any problem with that out on Lignumvitae, but they are just now getting reestablished. So we'll continue to monitor and make sure that we have a presence on the island to take care of things like that.
Yeah, I
You
was
always
curious
have
'cause-
to, you know, there are lobsters and that you're certainly able to fish and to do other activities within. Most of our park is 8,300 and, or excuse me, 8,830 acres of submerged land. And so there is quite a bit of fishing that goes on, lobstering, crabbing, that type of thing. But, you know, people do take illegal specimens that way as well.
Yeah, I was curious because I read a story a while back about it was actually on the mainland, but people that had traps to catch small songbirds and stuff for the pet trade, obviously illegally. And then once a couple years ago, I read about two guys that were caught with a key deer alive in their trunk.
Yeah,
Which,
well, that does happen, and that was a fairly recent. That key deer in the trunk was like last year. So,
oh, was it that recent? Okay.
yes, and you know, not only just poaching, but also you know, being hit by cars. The deer definitely have a hard life down here. Right now, they're mainly concerned with the salinity of their freshwater ponds. There are what that kind of ephemeral ponds that are freshwater, and their saltwater intrusion. The key deer can put up with a little salt in their water, but not a lot. So they're monitoring that very closely. But yeah, people think it'd be cool to take a deer home. Now, when Mary Rose is talking about stuff on Lignumvitae, there was a time when Lignumvitae was populated by a lot of non-native species that were brought in by the Mathesons and the caretakers. There were, you saw some of those pictures, peacocks, there were Galapagos tortoises, there were white-tailed deer brought in, and all of those species were trapped and removed. I don't know that they were eradicated, you know, like trying to sterilize the island or anything, but just mainly to bring it back to a normal state of flora and fauna. But not sure if that has to do with E.O. Wilson or not.
That was actually sort of leading into the next question I had, which was, are you guys having to contend much or a lot with, you know, invasive species that are a problem that, like, do you have to do any trapping or anything like that? I know that there's iguanas all over the Keys, and they're huge down there from what I remember. Like the biggest ones I've seen are down in the Keys.
I would say our heaviest population right now, knock on wood, I have not witnessed an iguana at Lignumvitae. And I'm very pleased with that. We are excruciatingly rigorous in what gets brought to that island. We're very concerned about the introduction of the New Guinea flatworm because it's a, you know, can be carried in on pots of plants and things. So we watch very carefully about what we take out to the island in terms of biological specimens. Now with the iguanas, we have a large quantity of them on Indian Key, and they can be quite destructive to infrastructure because they dig and they lay their eggs. And so right now we are discussing if we're going to trap for iguanas out on Indian, and we definitely have them at Windley, and they are undermining some of the older mining, the older quarrying equipment. So it's an ongoing struggle. And of course, non-native botanical specimens, we do have them out there, but we have an excellent park biologist, and we have worked very hard, and she works very hard to keep exotic non-native plant species under control. So we got a great review this year for our land management. That's a whole land management review where everybody, there's a whole committee that comes out and looks at all those kinds of things. and we are in what they call a maintenance condition for all of our exotic species due to some really hard work.
I can imagine. Are there any questions from anybody? Nothing. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Lou, for speaking to us. For anybody that came in late or missed part of the video, we are going to have this up on our YouTube channel. We just have to wait for a little while they haven't actually started showing the video yet at the park, so you guys got a sneak peek actually. But once they start showing it there, then we can post our YouTube video, so it'll be up on our channel. You just search for Key Biscayne Citizen Science Project, and it'll be under that channel. And that's all we have. So thank you all for coming, and thank you so much, Lou, for such a great presentation as always.
Thank you for the opportunity to debut our film. I'd like to just, as parting words, say, please come and visit. It's hot right now, and I know it's the dread H season, but we are just an incredible place to come in the wintertime. The temperatures are great. You saw that there's all types of recreational activities available to you, and we would welcome seeing anybody from Key Biscayne. I miss you guys, and I'm so glad to still be connected. So come on down.
Yeah,
I've been there numerous times, and it's a great place to come.
Thank you. Well, we welcome you back anytime.
Thank you so much.